You know, this March, it's going to be 6 years since the Switch released. It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but hey, it released in 2017, and it's been an interesting ride so far for this platform. But I have to say, the more I look back on all the different game releases, the system reveals, and even the potential future for it, I think it really is time we all sat down and just admitted exactly what the Switch is. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So first off, let's talk about exactly where we are right now with this system. If we look at like the dedicated video game sales that Nintendo posts up just very quickly, 111 million units sold, 863 million units of software. It's the fastest system from Nintendo, other than the DS, to get to 100 million units sold, which, I mean, there's not many of them, obviously. We have, like, the Wii and the DS and the Game Boy, and that's kind of it. And Nintendo, that's not necessarily a mark that Nintendo hits consistently across their releases, especially when you consider that the Wii and the DS were basically running alongside of each other there for a while, right? So yeah, it's not a common occurrence for them, but when they hit that number, it's generally because it's a runaway success from the get-go, like right away. I mean, the Wii, it was like Wii Mania there for a while, right? And the DS, that's probably the most mainstream system. I know people talk about the Wii where like their grandparents had the system and they don't even play video games, but I don't know, the DS to me, I think pulled in a larger audience that were playing games outside of the typical Legend of Zelda or something. Like Nintendogs is one of the best selling games on that system. So the Switch is in good company now, and it doesn't look like it's stopping anytime soon with the forecast that Nintendo's putting out there, which currently has the Switch like lining up 128 million systems sold by March of 2023. And the software, I think, is going to be on a crash course with 1 billion units around that time, which, by the way, is a mark that Nintendo's never hit. Even with the DS, 154 million units sold, 948. Same with the Wii, 921 million units of software. That billion mark is very difficult to hit. And in fact, the only company that's really been able to do it, and even on somewhat of a consistent basis, is Sony. The PS1 came up just shy. It was like 960 million. The PS2 blew away a billion software sold. It was like 1.5 billion software. The PS3 is basically at a billion. It's like 999 million. And the PS4 actually passed it pretty recently, like a year or two ago. So this is something that Nintendo's sort of been building up to, and software sales is paramount for a system's success. Overall, I would say when it comes to, well, it being just worth it for the company to spend time R&Ding the system, because the software is where they make all of the money, basically. The thing that's most impressive, though, about Nintendo's billion units sold that I believe they'll have by next year is that it's going to be all first party for the most part that's holding this system up. We've talked about things like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, that's just mind-blowing in terms of the sales that's been able to do. But you look down the list, it's like that, Animal Crossing, Smash Brothers, Legend of Zelda, which Zelda has never been this ridiculous seller in this way. Like, it's sold well enough, obviously, but like 27 million units. We've never seen that from The Legend of Zelda before. Pokemon, of course, is up there, but you have to get on number 5 for Pokemon, which is, again, a bit surprising. Super Mario Odyssey, Mario Party, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and then Ring Fit Adventure. Just to get on this list, by the way, you need to sell about 15 million copies of a game. And just for some comparisons to show you just how strange that lineup is there for best-selling games on a platform when it comes to first party. I mean, this is the original PlayStation. Yeah, you have Gran Turismo 1 and 2 up there as the first and third spot, but then there's like Final Fantasy 7, then 8, Tekken 3, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Crash Bandicoot 2, Warp, Tomb Raider, Metal Gear Solid. You kind of see what I mean. It's a couple of first-party games there, but then just a massive mix of third-party games. It was the same way with the PS2. San Andreas led the list there, but then there's Gran Turismo 3 and 4. By the way, Polyphony did a lot of... They really held up these PlayStation systems when they were first entering the space here, the couple of generations with Gran Turismo. I mean, just being big-time sellers on these platforms from like the mid-90s up through like the late 2000s. So, yeah, Polyphony was putting in the work. Grand Theft Auto Vice City, Final Fantasy X, Grand Theft Auto 3, Metal Gear Solid 2. Sony was smart at this time, and they realized that if they can get more and more third parties on board, it would indeed just boost their overall hardware sales, which then in turn feed back into their first party sales. Because even if a game didn't perform incredibly well on the PS2, it was still gonna most likely get them like God of War 2 at almost a 4.5 million units sold, which for a lot of places, that's enough, especially at this time, to be profitable. And just for fun, the PS3 with Grand Theft Auto 5 being like the number one sell, almost 30 million, by the way. That is ridiculous for that time. And then Grand Theft Auto 5, Last of Us, Uncharted 3, Uncharted 2. So you're starting to see more first-party games get into the mix here for Sony, like Metal Gear Solid 4, God of War 3, Gran Turismo 6, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and so on there. But yeah, once again, big third-party game at the top being Grand Theft Auto 5, which, I mean, that's even a franchise Nintendo has had to mostly live without until we had that trilogy, which, well, that went over well. Anyway, the point of showing all of that is to more or less make the case from the sales, hardware, software side that the Switch, yes, is doing something that Nintendo's never been able to do in the past, but also it's being compared in terms of the software sales to like Sony, who generally, like I said, sells a lot because they have a lot of that third-party support, but Nintendo's doing it without the Grand Theft Autos or the Call of Duties or anything there. And for the most part, it's just been all first party holding the system up. Sure, you get things like Monster Hunter Rise, that is a massive success for Capcom, even just on the Switch before it came to PC, but those releases are few and far between. And then the core concept itself, obviously, is the biggest thing that sets the Switch apart from anything else in the marketplace, and I believe is the biggest reason that so many people from the mainstream audience for gamers has kind of latched onto this device. It being this hybrid handheld console system that really works with just overall convenience for people's lives. I have to imagine that is one of the biggest driving forces right now, along with the catalog of games, of course, that's really made this so enticing to people. And while it hasn't really had any kind of price drop or anything, in fact, the price has gone up from $300 to $350, I can see if you're just someone who's casually playing games, you may look at this and say, hey, that's actually not a bad price because it's this console handheld hybrid system. Like, I think there is a lot of value for people there to where it doesn't feel as expensive as it may look when you break it down and go, okay, that's a Tegra X1 from 2015. The other thing I want to note with the Switch is just the overall variety of the games that have appeared here, especially from Nintendo's major intellectual properties. And we're to the point now where we're wondering if a new Kid Icarus will come back or a new F-Zero. We're not necessarily like, oh, when's that big Zelda or Fire Emblem game or that big Kirby game going to show up? They're there, right? Like that's the biggest thing. I guess you could say, when's the next Mario Kart game coming? But I mean, they have DLC. The thing's almost at 50 million. We're never going to get the next Mario Kart game at this point. But anyway, Kirby and the Forgotten Land is going to end up becoming the best-selling Kirby game. I think the best-selling one that's trying to pass is like the first Kirby game. So it's going to be there by the end of the year. Like, we'll get a report that's like, yeah, it's the best-selling Kirby game now. Even games like Mario Strikers that I was very critical of because of, just lack of basically everything, is still the fastest-selling game in the sports franchise for Nintendo. And basically, there is such thing as that Switch effect that people talk about. It is a real thing as Nintendo continues to move these games up from maybe even dormant franchises. They show up and they end up selling well. And then the third-party support that Nintendo seems to get are kind of the weird and quirky things like Live Alive being remade. Who would have seen that coming? But even like the birth of HD 2D from Square and Nintendo seemingly supporting it quite well on the Switch. It's a pretty good variety, I would say, on the system. You can go from playing Doom Eternal and then move over into Octopath Traveler. It's really looking back at all these numbers, the variety of games, the system itself with its core concept, and just kind of say, hey, you know what? It's time to admit that this is the best system Nintendo's ever released. And it actually has the potential to go on and be the best-selling system ever, because I think a lot of what I've gone over here is going to keep Nintendo in this Switch generation or this Switch branding for longer than people are expecting. Yeah, I feel like if we do end up seeing Nintendo wanting to stick it out in this generation for 8, 9, even 10 years, then yeah, the Switch will absolutely become the best selling system ever. It'll pass the PS2 in terms of hardware sold along with the DS, and it may even creep up to that PS2 1.5 billion sold for software. But again, it comes down to how Nintendo wants to treat the back end of this system's life, which we are coming up on now. Do they want to extend it with some sort of pro revision, or do they want to break away from it? Because I'll admit, if I'm running Nintendo and I get to April of next year and I'm looking at it, I'm saying, wow, we're almost at 130 million systems sold. Is it really time to move on, or is it time to do what we didn't do with the Wii and drop that Wii HD that I guess would be like a new Nintendo Switch or something, and see how much further we can take this thing? But let me know what you guys think about all this down below, because I will say I've been pretty resistant to saying that the Switch is the best system that Nintendo's ever released, and a lot of it has to do with nostalgia and all these GameCube games I have. But I mean, it's tough to argue with the numbers, the games, the concept. So let me know what you guys think about this one, and if you believe that Nintendo will continue to ride this generation out and this system become the best-selling video game, console, handheld, whatever you want to call it, of all time. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.